Yeah, it does seem more than 1 year for sure. I think it was March of 2015 when I was obviously just learning about the company and how it operates, and we were looking for distributors. And this particular discussion was with Arun, who's not here today. Arun looks after parts of the international business, basically all the international markets other than what Rod looks after. And we were looking for a distributor in Australia, and here comes a really good distributor, potential distributor, in my office. I think it was mid-March, and I was explaining to him the logic of why Royal Enfield. And he's basically done every single motorcycle there is. He understands motorcycle inside out. They've been in the business for 25 years, etc. And they were sitting, and they were sort of, their backs were, they were sitting backwards. They were not sort of leaning forward or anything. So I was leaning forward 2.5 months trying to sell Royal Enfield to Australians. And then they were planning to go and make a trip to Oragadam to see both TVT and Oragadam. And I told them, go there and let's have a chat after you come back. So I had forgotten about it. It was lots of work. So I think it was 3 days, and Arun and these two potential partners came back in my office, and I said, yeah, I remember our conversation. Can you tell me, how was it? So the guy leans forward and said, do you really want to know the truth? And I said, okay, tell me. So I sort of said, okay, tell me. And he says, we are floored. So I said, I got suddenly surprised and excited and said, yeah, tell me more. And basically they said, look, I have never thought in my wildest of dreams that was what Royal Enfield was. Sitting in Australia, we sell a few bikes, we love your brand, we understand what it does to the whole thing. But really why I'm telling you this story is that, I don't know where Lalit is, but what Lalit was saying in the morning on the fence sitters today on the investors, I think you've made that visit to Oragadam. I think half of those fence sitters would have already moved off the fence anyway because of the work that Govind and team have done on creating that unbelievable credibility source, which is where we manufacture and how we do it. I think it's a fascinating achievement to have been done, and I think that itself makes our jobs easier. But if the first half of the day was all about the logic, and you've seen that logic, I think the second half is a bit more about the magic. I think Lalit's brief to me was that we already give you a lot of data. So you know the business model, you know what we are doing, you have good Excel sheets and algorithms to know what we are going to deliver. So I'm going to focus the next half an hour in trying to give you, basically try and answer 2 questions, which I'm sure are the fundamental questions, but I'm going to dip in and out between the real and the surreal. So I will talk logic, but I will also talk a little bit of what the brand is. So this business is all about the fact that you cannot, the business and the brand are inextricably linked. You cannot pull them apart. So we will talk about that together. Actually, let's stay for a minute. Managing momentum is a very important headline for me. I think that's fundamentally what the management team is focusing on. It's trying to make sure that we understand what it takes to retain the momentum that we have in our bastion market and create over a period of time many more Indias. By saying many more Indias, I don't mean any disrespect to other nationalities. I mean that there are models, there are markets, there are consumer types, human insights which are very similar to what's happening in India, and they are waiting to be unlocked. And we are very, very convinced that if we do it right, we can unlock and create those same markets over a period of a decade and a half in many more markets. So that's really going to be the focus of what we're going to be discussing today. Yeah, and Siddharth's already talked about the fact that a year, I feel like I've already been here for 2 years. This was something that Siddharth's talked about, and I really do believe that I come from a background of about 2 decades of FMCG experience. I've handled P&L, I've handled brands, consumers, very large businesses and P&Ls also across the world. And often people ask me, so what does it feel to move industries? And I said, you know what, I haven't moved industries in my head, I've just moved brands. So for me, it's a very easy shift to move, and it's really because of something like this, which is that this is a very involved category. much more involved than some of the important categories, but slightly less involved categories that I worked for earlier. And I'm going to share with you some of my perspective of what that means for Royal Enfield in the industry of motorcycles. I think Royal Enfield has a unique position, as we know, within the industry as well. So really, in a structured way, I'm going to cover these 3 points. Our growth in our bastion market, which is India, retaining this momentum over the next 2-3 years, and what's the strategy and focus for our global thrust, and how's it all coming together. The India story is very well documented, and I would just divide our success, which you guys know as well as we do, into 3 very definitive vectors of growth. And I do believe growth should be consistent. We know that we are consistent. We were talking about the fact that we did 50,000 motorcycles in the month of 2010, in the year of 2010. That's what we will do in a month very soon. So whether that's in December or January, but that's the level of momentum that we have in terms of consistent growth. We're growing profitably. I think our EBIT numbers are off the chart. We are aware of that, and we continue to perform well. And we are competitive. And I think this is a very, very important benchmark of how we're performing. I think any brand or business that's growing 100 bips of market share a year is extremely creditworthy, and we are very proud of that. I think that's something really to watch out for. But really, we've talked about this, but what really makes us tick? And I have in my past experience, my past roles, handled very large brands, often larger than the brands that we have, or the brand that we have here. But there is a difference between large brands and brands that are called iconic or cult brands, and I'm only now beginning to understand some of that difference. I think every brand or business's dream is to be aspirational yet accessible, because that fine tightrope of between access and aspiration is what makes a brand really resonate with consumers over time. But truly iconic brands are able to build aspiration and access over time. So they are able to keep remaining aspiration and accessible over time. And that's what differentiates between large brands and iconic brands, the ability to walk this tightrope over a long period of time. And historically, our aspiration has actually been greater than our access. I think it's known very well that in India, Royal Enfield, and in many ways in those days, Bullet was the sort of front-end name for Royal Enfield, was the largest motorcycle. It owned the riding space, and it was also the most expensive motorcycle. So in many ways, it was the definitive place or the ownership in motorcycles. It was respected. And in many ways, it was higher than its access, because there are always 2 sides to a coin, and reliability because of its large size, being a little intimidating, and the cost of ownership were always barriers. And I think over a period of time, I think we must recognize in the last 5, maybe a little more than 5 years, we've increased access. We've increased access. Our cost of ownership, not just price, but our cost of ownership is one of the unique reasons why we are able to trade up people who are commuters into something which gives you more without losing sight of what the product is supposed to deliver on a day-to-day basis as well. It's a great commuter motorcycle or a product, but it does much more, and you don't have to cross a huge bridge. And this is not just a put-down price, but an overall cost of ownership, ecosystem, etc. And of course, I think it's well documented that we've increased our distribution, our direct reach, our dealerships have increased. But it's not been at the cost of aspiration. I think this is an important, very, very important way of defining headroom. We have various algorithmic way of defining headroom from a business point of view, from a number point of view. But I've been sort of trained very early in my career that headroom can be calculated very simply by whether your mental reach of your consumers is always higher than your physical reach. And you can cut that in any which way. You can cut that in saying how much is your spontaneous recall, top of mind recall. More recently, I think a hard measure of spontaneous recall is search. This data, 2.4, basically suggests within the 150cc segment that we have in India, how many people, which is 50% of people, are searching for us. over a market share of roughly 20%. So there is a tremendous headroom of people who are searching for us, not yet buying us, but they are searching for us. For various reasons, they would have still be sitting on that fence that I showed you on the last slide. The fact is this rate of change is also growing. So it's not just that the 50% is flat or declining. It was less and it's actually growing. It's a great indicator of the fact that the mind share, if it's higher than market share, we have good headroom. That's one way to look at it. Of course, the reason for that is very clear. We've had model launches which have huge demand. We've cleaned up a lot of our issues in the past on reliability through platform successes, and we have a very attractive low-cost business model which is giving us huge leverages across the business. But this is very, very important. This is in many ways, I believe, an ultimate proof of whether what we are doing is right or not. You saw some pictures in the audiovisual that Lalit showed you, which was about the youth coming towards motorcycling in the 60s. Well, the same thing is happening. The youth is a great barometer of whether what you're doing on your brand is working or not, if it's touching them or not. The average age of our buyer has dropped significantly in the last 5 years. If we had data to go backwards, it would have been even more stark, but we don't have that kind of data to suggest what the trends have been. But it's very clear that having a huge demographic shift is a radical thing. I haven't seen demographics change so quickly in such a short period of time, and that's a sign of the fact that the brand is becoming even more appealing and relevant to more number of people, and particularly the youth. And really, if I were to give you the larger picture, I think Siddharth talked about the overall pool, the number of motorcycles that are out there. We are just 2%. Our market share is 4.1%. And the fact of the matter is that while our market share is 4.2% or 4.1%, the number of people in total motorcycles now, I talked about 50% of only medium-weighted and above motorcycle searchers. I'm talking about total motorcycles now. There are close to 20% people who are searching for us, which is all motorcycles in India. If they're searching for anything on web, 20% are searching for Royal Enfield. Again, a nice way to understand, a different way of understanding the concept of headroom. That's something that those are lead indicators for us, which should give us a sense of whether we are on the right track or not. And that's something that the rate of change on this is something that we'll be watching out for very closely. As we go younger, as we go, the opportunities increase, but with opportunities obviously come a very clear responsibility of understanding why they're coming to us in the first place. And really we believe that our audience, this new audience, along with our current audience, which has been with us all this while, is really looking for real experiences, and this is very important. I mean, in a world where almost you look around you, you're seeing planned obsolescence. Your mobile phones have to be changed after every 1 year, otherwise you don't fit in. Your cars need to be changed, your model numbers keep changing. There's almost a planned obsolescence built into the way we operate. There is an autopilot way of working. We are actually, in many ways, anti that. We are talking about real experiences. We're talking about the fact that what you do with what you get, will make all the difference. It's not about the pen you buy, but what you do with it, what you write with it. That's more important. And that's really what our focus is. I mean, you would have tons of stories of Royal Enfields. Nobody talks about, I have a model number this or model number that. It's a Royal Enfield. It's a Bullet. It's a Classic. It's X. And they all fit in very well together. That's the beauty of this brand. And I think there is a realism in this brand that we want to continue to be cognizant of and drive it even harder. And that's really what it is. It's about keeping it real. And that's really what, as a culture, as a concept, we want to keep very close to our heart. This is a verbatim from one of our, obviously an enthusiast and also a customizer, Bobby Singh. There is an 18-minute clip on YouTube. You should just search for Old Delhi motorcycles. I would encourage you to see it whenever you have that time. It's got all the good, the bad, the ugly about the motorcycling and Royal Enfield, but the fact is it's with passion. And this is really true. The first time you ride a Royal Enfield, you are hooked for life. Obviously, I'm not saying the right word, but you'll get the meaning. The fact of the matter is that's exactly, why have I kept it here? And Lalit asked me to edit the word, and I have. But really, that is really important. That's the brand, guys. That's the sensibility that we really believe makes us different. Now, if you understand that, and you understand that's what the brand is doing to you, our task becomes clearer, with more focus. It's not easier, but it's clearer. Get more people to experience that, right? If you get that, the product does the rest. And the product does the rest in two ways. You either will say, this is for me, or it is not for me, but you won't be on the fence. So it makes it very clear what our job to be done is. And indeed, as a brand, and I come in from a place where I've spent tons of money, I've signed tons and tons of checks on marketing. I'm not saying we will not spend money, but we won't do it in areas which is what we believe is marketing trickery. It's not about that. We will spend money to serve the people who are involved with us better. I think there's a lot to be learned there, a lot to be done there. I'll talk briefly about what we are planning to do and what we are thinking about. There is going to be money spent, but we are not going to do that in terms of spray and pray awareness, but more in areas of making sure that we win in search people, win people who are coming to us in store, win people who are in use, using our product. How do we make their experience even better? There's a lot of money to be spent there, but it's going to be in that zone rather than in esoteric stuff. And really, this is the difference, I think, where other brands talk about lots of stuff. We believe that there is something very raw, real, and visceral about our brand, and that is spirit. A spirit built bike by bike. It's something that nobody else has. And we must be conscious, and I think we talked about it, and I will come back to it again. As we grow beyond our borders, we must understand and articulate this spirit to continue to connect with these consumers and these riders everywhere. But we should not lose sight of the fact that what we've achieved in India has taken a lot of time, and it's not going to be done overnight in other markets. And let's be humble, and let's be clear about the fact that there is a job to be done which is very unique, of building the aspiration first and then going on access. But really giving you a little bit of flavor of the brand, 60 years ago, Royal Enfield stole India's heart. Classic, purposeful design, minimal moving parts, distinct thump, Indian army tough, handcrafted, British roots and Indian soul. I think this is a very unique combination, the last line, British roots and Indian soul. A lot of our design philosophy, a lot of our engineering ethos, and Mark and Simon will talk about that, comes from a certain very, very clear, structured design approach, which we want to absolutely hold on to. Yet at the same time, the reason why this is the only brand that has survived that era is because it's repurposed itself. It's been able to repurpose itself over time and terrain and made it relevant for people in every era that it's operated in. There's something about the Indian spirit which is also very important. So if you like the British roots, British engineering philosophy with the Indian soul and spirit are very, very unique combinations that we need to absolutely imbibe in the way we will conduct ourselves, whether on design or in terms of giving delight to consumers. And riding an Enfield has always meant that you could go anywhere, feel everything, feel bigger, the unmistakable thump, the fuel tank, the Enfield logo and the badges of honor. And it still does. That's the beauty of it. And this is true. These are very exciting words, but they are what I call fat words. Everyone's using them. Everyone's talking about them. And that's exactly why we may use them, but that's not really what we are about. We are not disrespecting what other brands are doing, but everyone's doing that. Our core purpose is around bringing riding back to basics. Is this where we run the video? Okay, video.
It must feel wrong, imperfect. We must jangle. Stir something. Every note, original, unchanged by time. Form. leaving a good thing alone. Every part for a reason, connecting with plain ground. It ages, does not retire. Divisive, inclusive, has seen the worst of it. It rolls on, you get on. See you on the road.
RLR, some of you would have definitely heard of him and definitely met him, said this about the brand, and I think it's very important. Royal Enfield is not bought for pure acceleration nor for fuel efficiency. There are no bells and whistles associated with it, but there is purity and purpose built into it. Having said that, let me put it up front that we don't do too badly on those attributes, but we don't talk about them. But that's not what we're all about. But the reason why we are bought in hordes every day, and we have the kind of franchise that we'd have and continue to enjoy, is because we do pretty well on those parameters as well. We don't disrespect those. But there is a reason why we don't talk about that. Is all about the reason why people would like to get onto a Royal Enfield goes beyond just the functional attributes, which are the rational side of things. And hopefully some of the charts that I've shared with you are bringing that out. We strip away everything unnecessary, only what's needed, nothing that isn't. And we bring man, machine, and terrain together. And this is really, really important because, like I said at the beginning, the spirit is all about wanting to reconnect with yourself. That's the bigger zeitgeist that we are talking about. A lot of people, when they ask us, saying, why are we growing, what's happening, what's the new innovation, I think we get trapped in the automotive language. When I sometimes respond to them saying, look, we are part of a bigger set of ducks that are getting lined, a younger population, people who want to express themselves, people who are saying, I will not put my life on hold anymore. I will live a little bit for myself. I have roles to play, but I have my own role to play for myself. People draw a blank, but that's really the truth. The truth is that there are many things that are intangible, which you will not probably see on your Excel sheets. You will not see the logic of it. But we've been fortunate enough to be right there, sweet spotting, on a set of people who have chosen to live a real life, who respect the importance of using their hands, being part of something which is pure and real and their own and not cookie cutter. And that's really what it is all about. And more people around the world, if you look around yourself, are doing it. It's happening in various industries. It's happening in various ways. It's also happening with Royal Enfield. This is an interesting quote. It's a long quote, but it's a beautiful quote written by Gregory David Roberts, who's an author. And by the way, there's apparently a movie coming out very soon where Johnny Depp is going to play him, which is about this guy. An Australian guy, again, he came into India. He stayed in the slums of Dharavi, and he wrote this book post that experience. But it in many ways defines the ethos of what a rider defines the brand. And it's not a rational definition, but it's exactly the definition which we need to appreciate and understand and keep ensuring that we keep that going forward. The Enfield of India 350cc Bullet was a single-cylinder, 4-stroke motorcycle constructed to the plans of the original 1950s model of the British Royal Enfield, renowned for its idiosyncratic handling as much as for its reliability and durability. The Bullet was a bike that demanded a relationship with its rider. That relationship involved tolerance, patience, and understanding on the part of the rider. In exchange, the Bullet provided the kind of soaring, celestial, wind-weaving pleasure that birds must know, punctuated by not infrequent near-death experiences. I couldn't describe the brand manifesto any better. and it was done by an ex-convict drug addict and many other things which are unmentionable many, many years ago. And really, that's the balance between the British heritage, which is very, very important for us from many philosophies, and some of them will be talked about and shared with you today. And while at the same time, the fact that it's alive and kicking is because it was alive and kicking on the roads of India, where grit, misery, joy, and all of it happens at all points in time, and we love all of it. Broken roads, slush, rocks and sand, Himalayan cold, Thar desert heat, Delhi traffic, unknown paths, solitude, stuff of highway legend, outliving generations, from sea level to 18,000 plus feet. I'm not revealing any product launches here. I'm just talking about what the brand is. The spirit has no boundaries, and I think there is a line which talks about the target. We target and portray the real rider, the guy who actually gets on his bike and really rides, the guy with whom who wants raw experiences, who feels the pain and pleasure of being human. That's the capability I think Siddharth talked about at the beginning. That's the capability and the sensibility that we need to build as an organization to understand this rider. And honestly speaking, if we can get that piece right and we build that capability within our organization and within the ecosystem, we'll be fine for many more decades as well. This is an old ad which I pulled out. I think it's still as fresh and relevant as it was when it was used. It is true that we are not for everyone. We never have been. But more and more people are joining that bandwagon. We don't want to change our position. It just so happens that our position is so strong that more and more people are very keen to join that bandwagon. And therefore we exist to riding real. I want to share a conceptual chart which is about iconic brands. I talked about iconic brands, and as we grow global, we must understand that there are brands that logically should not exist. All of these 4 brands that you see on this chart, whether it's a Red Bull or it's a Mini Cooper or it's an Nespresso or a GoPro, we don't need another caffeinated, foul-tasting drink, energy drink. We don't need another small car. We don't need another coffee-making machine, and we certainly don't need another camera. But those are not the industries in which they're operating. That's not the mindset or the experience or the whole ethos of those brands. Because if you look at it technically on an Excel sheet, these 4 brands should not exist, right? And this is what one of the founder of Red Bull said: if we don't create the market, it won't exist. And really, Royal Enfield is already doing that in India. It's already reframing the segment or reframing the category. And that is this mindset, which is, if you see these 3 lines or 4 lines, in many ways, that's our whole strategy on a page. We want to get more people to ride, get existing riders to ride more, and get our core riders to chart new courses to ride pure. And we are already doing all these 3. If you look at a lot of people who are commuters, they look at Royal Enfield as a trade-up brand, but as a brand that it can do both things. It can fulfill the commute requirement, but the notion of you to do more is luring enough, and you don't have to burn a hole in your pocket to do so. That's the sweet spot. And that's really where a lot of our growth is coming in from. At the same time, we are not losing sight of the fact that the people who are our users, we want to keep nudging them to ride more. And that's the ecosystem that Siddharth talked about. How we can invest significantly more in nudging people who have that motorcycle in their backyard, who probably commute every day, but we want to nudge them to do what they had bought the motorcycle for. Those guys, those bikes on street are our true GRPs. The guys who ride to the Himalayas every weekend are our endorsers and our celebrities. Those are the people that we want to keep encouraging to go out there. That's money well spent. And absolutely right, there would be a certain set of people, probably the 0.1% of people who know their stuff. we must always be partnering with them to forge new products, services, rides, the whole jing bang, which motivates other people to join as well. That's really our formula. Now, how many brands are potentially capable of doing all three? The answer is very few. I have not seen too many in my experience, and I've had a few brands that I've handled in my past 20 years. The ability to get more people in, non-users, and the ability to retain your current users, and the ability to be aspirational, if you have all three and you're running that piece, that's a pretty good place to be. And this is a concept. We talk tons of storytelling, and I've done tons of storytelling myself, so I'm not saying storytelling is bad. This organization, and this is my observation of the organization, and I'll show you one picture. It's not a very large picture. It's on the left-hand side because I've got 4 pictures to show you. This is taken from the first day of Ridermania in Goa, where Sachin, who's the guy on the left, who you can't really see, but I'm going to, and his entire team of what the communities, rides and communities team is. They went onto stage on day 1 before the Ridermania kicked off. And the purpose of them standing there is an important one to understand. They stood there to say, we are this, our names, and we'd like to meet you over the next 4 days. Tell us the good, bad, and the ugly about what you feel about, because there are 5,500 people on Royal Enfields that came to Goa to attend Ridermania, and they wanted to meet all of them. Many other festivals happen in the country, and I've seen a few, where the management and the communities and rides team sign bills at the end of the week. And I think this is a very important value that should not be underestimated in its power. There's a lot more to be done, but I like where we are on this culture. There's Adarsh, Sachin, and Santosh, 3 of our guys who've probably done more number of thousands and thousands of kilometers every year on existing and new models that we are trying out. In my earlier roles, I didn't do my own laundry or I didn't do my own dishes. But that's what this is. This is equivalent of that, because those were the brands I was handling. In this company, the good thing is we do our own dishes. So we won't necessarily, we will know when the surfactant agent or the equivalent of that is hurting you or not, or is creating blisters in your hand. It's a great value to have. You cannot go wrong if you're experiencing and figuring out your products and its experience itself. I think Siddharth alluded to the ecosystem, the customizers, and that 18-minute clip that I've encouraged you to watch is going to be one such clip. But there are tons of people who are just so passionate. They will only work on a bullet. They will not touch anything else. And there are many of those. And I think there is something about the ecosystem that we need to do more on, by the way. But we are very clear that that's one of the reasons why it's not just a conversation of how much does it cost. Ya kitta deti hai, or how much does it give in terms of mileage. It goes beyond that. It's the ecosystem, the support system that gives you the confidence to get onto an Enfield. And that's one part of that. Every corner of the country, you know that there is an ustad who can roll up his sleeves and fix your bike. And the other concept, I talked about aspiration greater than access, and I talked a little bit about mental reach should be greater than physical reach. And there are other ways to do that. We have started our apparel and gear business. It's early days, but we've got very positive response from it. We are already in 7 exclusive gear stores in India. We are also making our gear, apparel, and accessories available across the world in many stores, in all our Royal Enfield stores. What it obviously does is obvious, right? It increases the gap between the mind and the bike market share. Many more people wearing and being part of the ecosystem of involved users or potential users of Royal Enfield. We just want to increase the gap while not losing our market share, in fact gaining it, but we want to make sure that our mental reach actually keeps increasing. We're also able to access, therefore, places where a normal dealership cannot be. We have an outstanding store, I would say so myself, please go and see it if you haven't, in Khan Market, for example, which is an exclusive apparel store, gear store, where we sell gear, we also sell bikes. We also book bikes from that store. But it's a very different experience. for people to come and see a Royal Enfield brand experience, which you otherwise cannot get in just a motorcycle dealership, however good we make it, and just the location and the kind of profile doesn't allow it to be what we want it to be. So it's creating that healthy gap between mental reach being higher than physical reach. We are also online, and this is a foray that we will only make stronger over time. So those are other ways. To be honest, these are just a couple of things. We have a lot of stuff in the pipeline. I'm hoping that in the next year or two, you start seeing garage cafes, Royal Enfield cafes, which will have, again, build a lot of aspiration for people who would eventually be riding on motorcycles as well. And all of what I've said obviously is important not just for India. We need to manage our momentum in India. We are very confident that we invest in these areas, we will have a very unique position which our brand already offers, but our experience will also offer. And I think we've already made strides in that area, but there's a lot more that we can do in that area, and that's where we will focus our capabilities on. And as we go global, it's interesting, I think Siddharth alluded to it, I'll show it to you diagrammatically as well. In my experience, I see most industries operate in triangles or pyramids. Yeah, you've got a mass, you've got a mid, you've got a premium. This is a slightly quirky industry. Most developing markets, and this is how India looks, by the way. This is the market we are in today, but this is how most developing markets are. Over-indexed commuter segment, whether it is Southeast Asia, large markets, Latin America, Brazil, Colombia, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia. I'm not even going to Africa, but all of these markets, if I were to talk about all of these developing markets, they all behave like an Eiffel Tower rather than as a pyramid. Interestingly enough, and I think Rod will allude to that when he comes up, the mature markets, what we call the heritage markets, where motorcycling as a concept has been along for a long time, the reverse is true. You've got an over-index towards the sort of top, but there's pretty much nothing in the middle and very little happening in the bottom. So it's interesting that you have you've got a Toblerone on one side and Hershey's Kisses on the other for the Americans in the room. But yeah, it's a bit of a strange model, and which obviously means that this model will change with the right brand and with the right business focus. What's the reason for the industry's inability to get new users? You've got commuter motorcycles, very, very similar. We know the stuff. Very, very rational attributes, functional delivery, cookie cutter in some forms, if I may say so. And on the other side, you've got motorcycles that have gone extreme. They are great, probably motorcycles, but they are almost inaccessible to expand the segment. So there is absolutely very little happening to say, why should a 28-year-old guy look at a $25,000 put-down price to enjoy life? That doesn't make any sense anymore in some of these markets on the right-hand side. What is happening to expand the segment where motorcycling does what it was supposed to do 60 years ago, which was just to have fun? You will commute, but you'll have just fun, wind in your face and all of that. Where is that gone? That is not happening here, that's not happening there. And that's why we are very convinced that what we are doing in India can be done across. If we do it right, we don't have to change the brand. We just do the same thing and it will expand the market in both the developing and the developed. We must, however, remember that and I talked about this briefly, and this is a message for all of us internally as well, that we must not overheat access before we drive aspiration. And that is where our city strategy comes in. You know, human insights, human needs don't sit in boundaries. If we call ourselves a brand that is boundaryless, then we should not get trapped with boundaries which are geographies. There are cities that behave the same way. A person sitting in a Dubai or a Kuala Lumpur or a Jakarta or a Paris or a New York, certain parts of Bombay, certain parts of Lagos, you'd be surprised how similar they are in what they do, what their motivations are, what they eat, what they want from life, how they run a 24-hour clock, a 7-day week, etc., etc. We want to make sure, as Siddharth said, and I'm not going to spend too much time, we want to make sure we get that ecosystem going for us, create the aspiration and pull between in these markets, in homogeneous places where we know we will do well. But there's a lot of learning that we will do as we go forward. So we've already made forays in cities. We will continue to expand that and learn from it. But I think there's going to be tremendous learning over the next 2-3 years in that area. Even in markets like North America, and Rod will talk about it, I don't want to steal the thunder from his presentation. We will explore the alternative of saying, in North America, I'm going to go the normal distributive route, but let's see what happens when we go with a focused ecosystem creation of our own. What happens? And we will learn from that, I'm sure. That model, I'm quite confident if we get right, becomes a repeatable model that can be rolled out everywhere else. So I'm really looking forward to models like in Rod's market or in some of the other markets, which can become eventually repeatable models for us to bolt on and roll out everywhere else as well. And therefore, these are cities we've already started our presence in, and we hope to learn from these cities, and then we will, and as I said, countries will follow. In sum, aspiration greater than access for us to be able to reframe the segment or the category, mental reach greater than physical reach, and story living. If we live a good story, I can guarantee it we'll be able to tell that story many, many more times and share it with many, many more people. And that's what we're doing right now. We'll keep trying to be better at that. That's it from me. I'm sure there'll be questions, and I'm very happy to answer them in the later session. With that, over to Rod.